The frigid water swallowed Penelope Keller whole. Her scream cut short as the merciless current dragged her beneath the surface. One moment she had been carefully crossing the river on horseback. The next a sudden surge had swept both her and her mount into the swirling depths. Terror gripped her as she fought against the Colorado River's unforgiving embrace, her soaked skirts becoming leaden weights pulling her downward. "Hold on!" The shout barely registered through the roar of water in her ears. A strong arm circled her waist, hauling her against a solid chest as they were both spun by the whirlpool's cruel force. Penelope glimpsed a weathered face, steady blue eyes that held no fear despite their dire situation. "Hands to my shoulders, trust the turn," the cowboy commanded, his voice cutting through her panic. "River's got a pattern, fight it and you drown." With the last of her strength, Penelope gripped his shoulders, forcing herself to stop thrashing as he'd instructed. The cowboy worked with the current rather than against it, using its momentum to propel them toward the shallows. When they finally stumbled onto the riverbank, Penelope collapsed onto the mud, coughing violently as water spilled from her lungs. Her rescuer dropped beside her, his broad-shouldered frame heaving with exertion. "You're going to be just fine, madam," he assured her, his voice a deep rumble that somehow steadied her racing heart. He introduced himself between labored breaths. "Name's Hank Porter." "Penelope Keller," she managed between coughs. I believe I owe you my life, Mr. Porter." Hank's sun-bronzed face broke into a tired smile, water still streaming from his dark hair. "Just doing what any decent man would. Though crossing Whitewater Canyon alone wasn't the wisest decision." "I wasn't alone until my guide abandoned me yesterday," Penelope said bitterly, wringing water from her hair. "Took half my supplies too." "Colorado territory ain't kind to the unprepared," Hank observed, rising to his feet and offering her his hand. "Where you headed?" "Silverton, my brother's claim." Penelope took his offered hand, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and years under the western sun. "That's near 40 miles north through mountain country." Hank frowned, scanning the horizon. "Night's coming soon. My camp's not far. We should get you warm before the chill takes hold." Penelope hesitated. Her mother back in Boston would be horrified at the impropriety of accepting such an offer from a stranger. But this was 1876 in the untamed West, and she was soaked to the bone in the shadow of mountains where spring nights still brought frost. "I've lost everything in that river, Mr. Porter. My horse, my supplies." She gestured helplessly at the rushing water that had nearly claimed her life. "Then it seems you could use a friend." He whistled sharply, and moments later a chestnut gelding trotted toward them. "Lucky here can carry us both to camp." As Hank helped her mount and swung up behind her, Penelope realized she had little choice but to trust this stranger. His arm wrapped securely around her waist as they set off, and despite her sodden clothes, she felt a different kind of warmth begin to spread through her chest. Hank's camp proved to be a small but sturdy cabin tucked into a grove of aspens. "It ain't much," he explained as he helped her down from the horse, "but it keeps the weather out." Inside, he built up the fire while Penelope hovered near the warmth, shivering in her wet clothes. Without comment, Hank rummaged through a trunk and handed her a flannel shirt and trousers. "They'll be too big, but they're dry. You can change behind that blanket," he said, pointing to a corner where a wool blanket hung as a makeshift partition. "I'll step outside to tend to Lucky." When he returned, Penelope was drowning in his clothes, the sleeves rolled up several times and the pants cinched with a length of rope. The sight brought a smile to Hank's weathered face. "First time I've seen those clothes look good," he commented, then quickly busied himself preparing a simple meal of beans and salt pork. Over dinner, Penelope explained her journey. "My brother Patrick wrote that he's struck a promising vein, but he's fallen ill. No doctor in Silverton, and he needs someone to look after his claim while he recovers in Durango. Family's important, Hank nodded. You've come a long way from Boston. How did you know I'm from Boston? Hank chuckled. Your accent. And those fancy boots before they got soaked weren't made for Western trails. I suppose I'm rather obvious, Penelope admitted. Everyone I've met seems to know immediately that I don't belong here. Didn't say that. Hank's eyes met hers across the fire. Just said you're from somewhere else. Belonging something different altogether. They fell into an easy conversation as the night deepened around the cabin. Hank shared stories of his 10 years in the territory, first as a cavalry scout, then a trapper, and now working as a guide and occasional ranch hand. Penelope found herself laughing at his tales, the terror of her near drowning receding as warmth and companionship replaced it. So what brings a man like you to this isolated spot? She finally asked. A shadow crossed his face. Needed some quiet after the war. Saw too much during my time with the 7th Cavalry. You fought in the war between the states? And after? Indian campaigns. His voice grew distant. Some things a man needs to put behind him. Penelope recognized the pain in his expression, the same haunted look her father had worn after returning from the war. Never quite the same man who had marched away in his Union blue. I understand, she said softly. My father served with the Massachusetts 54th. Surprise flickered in Hank's eyes. The colored regiment? Under Colonel Shaw. Yes, my father was a doctor attached to their unit. He believed all men deserved the same care, regardless of color. Pride tinged her voice. Not a popular position, even in Boston. Your father sounds like a good man. He was. The simple past tense hung between them, a bridge of shared understanding. Hank nodded but asked no further questions, respecting the boundary of her grief. Morning brought clear skies and difficult decisions. Penelope's clothes had dried overnight, though they were stained and crumpled from their river journey. I can take you to Silverton, Hank offered over breakfast. 3 days' ride. Maybe 4 with the mountain passes still holding snow. I couldn't impose further, Penelope protested. You've already saved my life. And what's your plan otherwise? Walk 40 miles through mountain country with no supplies. When she had no answer, he continued more gently. Look, I was heading north anyway. Been hired to guide a mining survey next month. Need to scout the trail first. Penelope studied him, trying to discern his true motives. In her experience, men rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. Yet there was something in Hank Porter's steady gaze that inspired trust. I can pay you when we reach my brother's claim, she offered. We'll sort that out when we get there, Hank replied, already packing supplies. For now, we should make use of the good weather. They set out with Penelope riding behind Hank on Lucky, her arms wrapped tentatively around his waist. As the day progressed and the trail narrowed through rocky passes, her grip grew more confident, more necessary. She found herself acutely aware of the solid strength of him, the rhythm of his breathing, the scent of leather and wood smoke that clung to his buckskin jacket. By midday, they stopped in a sun-dappled clearing beside a small stream. While Hank refilled their canteens, Penelope stretched her aching legs and admired the majesty of the snow-capped peaks surrounding them. It's beautiful, she breathed. So different from Massachusetts. Different kind of beauty out here, Hank agreed, handing her a canteen. Harsher, maybe, but more honest. Is that why you stay? For the beauty. Hank considered this as he checked Lucky's hooves. Partly. Out here, a man's judged by what he does, not who his family was or how he talks. I like that simplicity. Yet it doesn't seem simple at all, Penelope observed. Everything is a challenge: water, food, shelter. In Boston, I never thought about such things. That's the truth of it, Hank smiled. Makes you appreciate what matters. Their journey continued through the afternoon, with Hank pointing out landmarks and sharing knowledge about the plants and animals they encountered. When they made camp that evening in the shelter of a rocky overhang, Penelope surprised herself by helping to gather firewood without being asked, eager to contribute. As they sat beside the crackling fire, wrapped in blankets against the mountain chill, Penelope found herself watching Hank's profile, admiring the quiet confidence with which he moved through this wilderness. "What made you decide to come all this way?" Hank asked suddenly. "Most women wouldn't travel alone to such a place." Penelope stared into the flames. "My brother's all the family I have left. And Boston. There was nothing for me there anymore. No husband? Suitors?" The questions were casual, but Penelope detected a hint of something more in his tone. "I was engaged," she admitted, "to a banker's son. A suitable match, everyone said." Hank waited, sensing there was more to the story. "I found him with my closest friend 2 weeks before the wedding." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. "Everyone expected me to forgive, to proceed with the marriage anyway, for propriety's sake. But you didn't." "No." Penelope looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I refused to build a life on lies. When Patrick's letter came, it seemed like Providence. A chance to start fresh where no one knew my shame." "Doesn't sound like your shame to bear," Hank observed quietly. His simple statement, free of judgment or pity, loosened something tight in Penelope's chest. She found herself blinking back unexpected tears. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. They fell silent, the fire popping and hissing between them, each lost in thought. When Penelope finally rolled into her blanket for sleep, she found herself wondering what life might be like in this wild place, with its harsh beauty and men like Hank Porter who spoke truth plainly and judged actions rather than appearances. The second day brought them higher into the mountains, where patches of snow still lingered in shadowed valleys. The trail grew treacherous, forcing them to dismount and lead Lucky through the narrowest passages. Hank's hand found Penelope's at difficult crossings, strong and steady as he guided her over loose shale and around drop-offs that made her heart race. "Not much farther to Sheffield Pass," Hank assured her as they paused to catch their breath. "There's a line shack on the other side where we can spend the night." Penelope nodded, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cool air. Her city's soft muscles ached from the unaccustomed exertion, but she was determined not to complain. There was a satisfaction in this physical challenge that she'd never experienced in her sheltered Boston life. "You're tougher than you look," Hank commented, a note of admiration in his voice. "Most tenderfeet would be demanding to turn back by now." "Perhaps I'm finding my strength," she replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her words. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits despite their different backgrounds. The moment shattered as a distant crack echoed through the mountains. "Rifle shot," Hank said, instantly alert. "Stay close." They proceeded cautiously, Hank's hand now resting on the revolver at his hip. As they rounded a bend in the trail, they came upon a grisly scene, a man sprawled face down beside a fallen mule, blood soaking the rocky ground beneath him. Hank approached carefully, checking for signs of whoever had fired the shot. Finding none, he knelt beside the wounded man, gently turning him over. "He's alive," Hank called to Penelope. "Badly hurt, though." Penelope hurried forward, her father's medical teachings overcoming her fear. The man was middle-aged, with a graying beard and miner's clothes. A bullet had torn through his shoulder, leaving an ugly wound that still seeped blood. "We need to stop the bleeding," she said, already removing her shawl to create a bandage. "Do you have any whiskey? It will help clean the wound." Hank nodded, impressed by her composure as he retrieved a flask from his saddlebag. Together they worked to stabilize the injured man, who drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling incoherently about claim jumpers and stolen gold. "We can't leave him," Penelope insisted when they had done all they could. "He'll die out here alone." "The line shack's only a few miles ahead," Hank decided. "I can make a travois to pull him behind Lucky." Using saplings and rope, Hank quickly constructed a simple drag stretcher. They carefully transferred the wounded miner onto it and secured him with blankets. "What about the people who shot him?" Penelope asked nervously, scanning the surrounding cliffs. "Likely long gone with whatever they came for," Hank replied, though his watchful gaze suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "Still, we'll move carefully." The going was slow with their injured charge, and the sun had set by the time they reached the small wooden structure nestled in a protected valley. The line shack was basic, one room with a stone fireplace, a rough table, and 2 narrow bunks, but it offered welcome shelter from the increasingly cold night. Once they had settled the wounded miner in one of the bunks, Hank set about building a fire while Penelope examined their patient more thoroughly. "The bleeding has slowed," she reported. "But he's feverish. The wound needs proper cleaning." "There should be some supplies here," Hank said, searching through the shack's meager provisions. He produced a dusty medical kit with surprising contents. "Looks like we're not the first to need doctoring up here." Working together by lantern light, they cleaned and properly bandaged the miner's wound. When they had done all they could, Penelope sat back on her heels, exhaustion finally claiming her. "You've done this before," Hank observed, handing her a cup of coffee laced with whiskey. "My father taught me," she explained, accepting the warm drink gratefully. "He believed a woman should know how to care for injuries, especially during the war when doctors were scarce." "Your father was a wise man." Hank settled beside her on the floor, his shoulder just touching hers. "You did good work tonight." His simple praise warmed her more than the coffee. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the wind picking up outside and the crackle of the fire. The injured miner slept fitfully, occasionally muttering about a place called Widow's Creek and something hidden there. "What do you think happened to him?" Penelope asked softly. "Territories full of desperate men," Hank replied. "Gold fever makes some lose their humanity entirely." From his ramblings, sounds like he found something valuable and someone decided to take it the easy way. "Will we be safe here?" Hank's hand found hers in the dimness. "I won't let anything happen to you, Penelope. That's a promise." The simple touch of his calloused fingers against hers sent a tremor through her that had nothing to do with fear. When she looked up, his face was closer than she expected, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. For a breathless moment, Penelope thought he might kiss her. Instead, Hank squeezed her hand gently before releasing it to add wood to the fire. "You should get some sleep," he said, his voice rougher than before. "Take the other bunk. I'll keep watch for a while." Penelope wanted to protest, to recapture that moment of connection, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. She barely remembered laying her head on the thin mattress before sleep claimed her. She woke to gray dawn light filtering through the shack's single window and the smell of coffee. Hank stood at the crude stove, cooking something that made her stomach growl in anticipation. "Our patient's doing better," he reported when he noticed she was awake. "Fever's down. He was lucid enough to tell me his name, Abel Johnson. Prospector from Durango." Penelope rose to check on Abel, finding his color improved and his breathing steadier. "He's stronger than he looks," she remarked, changing his bandage with gentle hands. "Most who survive out here are," Hank replied, handing her a plate of beans and salt pork. "He says there's a settlement about 10 miles ahead, Cooperville. Has a doctor of sorts. We can get him proper help there." The day's journey was arduous with their injured companion, but by late afternoon, The small mining settlement came into view, a cluster of wooden buildings and tents huddled in a valley. They were met with curiosity and then concern as townsfolk recognized Abel. "Claim jumper's been hitting solo miners all through these parts," explained the town's doctor, a grizzled former army surgeon, as he examined Abel. "You likely saved his life, bringing him in." While Abel was tended to, Hank and Penelope found themselves welcomed at the town's only establishment, a combination saloon, general store, and hotel run by a formidable widow named Mrs. Cooper, the settlement's namesake. "Any friend of Abel's is welcome here," she declared, providing them with hot food and cold beer. "And anyone who helps neighbors in need has a place at my table." That evening, fed and rested, Penelope found herself sitting on the hotel's small porch beside Hank, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The settlement had grown quiet except for the occasional burst of laughter from the saloon. "We should reach your brother's claim by tomorrow afternoon," Hank said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Yes," Penelope replied, surprised by her reluctance at the thought of their journey ending. "I can't thank you enough for your help." "No thanks needed. Been a pleasure having the company." He paused, then added more softly, "Your company, especially." The warmth in his voice drew her gaze to his face. In the lamplight spilling from the window, his features were softer, his eyes holding something that made her heart quicken. "I've enjoyed yours as well," she admitted. "More than I expected to enjoy anything when I set out on this journey." Hank turned to face her fully. "Penelope, I'm not a man of fancy words or fine education, but these past days with you—" He hesitated, searching for the right expression. "You've made me see things differently, made me want things I'd given up on." "What things?" she whispered, hardly daring to breathe. "A home that's more than just a shelter, a purpose beyond just surviving." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. Someone to share it all with. The simplicity of his declaration moved her more than any flowery speech ever could. In Boston, courtship was a complex dance of social obligations and family expectations. Here, under the vast canopy of stars, there was only truth between them. "I hardly know you," Penelope said, though her fingers tightened around his. "You know the parts that matter," Hank countered, "and I know enough about you to want to learn the rest." When he leaned toward her, Penelope met him halfway. His kiss was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, his arms encircled her, drawing her closer as the kiss deepened into something that spoke of longing and promise. The sound of the saloon door opening broke them apart. Mrs. Cooper emerged, pretending not to notice their flushed faces as she announced that a room was ready for the lady whenever she wished to retire. Later, lying in her narrow bed, Penelope touched her lips, still feeling the pressure of Hank's kiss. Everything was happening so quickly, yet it felt more real than anything in her carefully structured Boston life had ever been. She fell asleep wondering what tomorrow would bring and whether she had the courage to embrace this unexpected chance at happiness. Morning brought news that changed their plans. Abel Johnson, recovering but still weak, revealed that the men who attacked him were part of a gang that had been terrorizing the area for months. "They're led by a man called Blackwell," Abel explained as they gathered in Mrs. Cooper's kitchen. "Mean as a wounded bear and twice as dangerous. He's got 4 men riding with him, all killers." "What were they after?" Hank asked. "My claim's near Widow's Creek, same area as your brother's place," Abel said to Penelope. "Found a rich vein last month. Kept it quiet, but somehow Blackwell got wind of it." Penelope's blood ran cold. "My brother, Patrick Keller?" Abel interrupted. "Tall fellow, red beard." "Yes. Do you know him?" Abel nodded grimly. "His claim borders mine. Good man. Helped me when I took sick last winter." He hesitated before continuing. Miss Keller, your brother's claim is one of the richest in the area. If Blackwell's gang is working their way through Widow's Creek. The implication hung heavy in the air. We need to get to him, Penelope said, rising abruptly. Now. Not alone, you don't, Mrs. Cooper declared. I'll send word to the other settlements. We need to put together a proper party to deal with these vermin once and for all. That could take days, Penelope protested. My brother could be in danger now. Hank, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. I know a faster route to Widow's Creek. If we leave now, we could be there by nightfall. Mrs. Cooper objected strongly, but Hank was resolute. We won't engage them directly. Just scout the situation, make sure Patrick's safe. If there's trouble, we'll fall back and wait for reinforcements. Within the hour, they were on their way, supplied with fresh provisions and a second horse borrowed from a sympathetic townsman. The trail Hank chose was barely visible, winding through steep ravines and dense stands of pine. Used this route during the war, he explained as they pushed their mounts at a steady pace. Scouting parties could move undetected between valleys. Penelope rode beside him, anxiety for her brother warring with new feelings for the man at her side. Hank, she began hesitantly, about last night. No regrets, I hope, he said, his eyes remaining on the difficult trail. None, she assured him. But everything is happening so quickly. Yesterday I was just trying to reach my brother. Today she broke off, unsure how to define what she was feeling. Hank reined in his horse, turning to face her fully. I know it's sudden, and I know you have obligations to your brother. I'm not asking for promises, Penelope, just a chance. His honesty was disarming. No games, no manipulation, just an open heart offered without guarantee of return. It was perhaps the bravest thing she had ever witnessed. You have that chance, she told him softly. Whatever happens today, whatever we find at my brother's claim, that won't change. The smile that transformed his face was worth any uncertainty. They continued their journey with renewed purpose, pushing harder as the sun began its westward descent. Late afternoon found them approaching Widow's Creek, a narrow valley with a swift-running stream at its center. From their vantage point on a ridge, they could see several small cabins scattered along the creek's edge. Abel said your brother's claim is the third one up from the south end, Hank murmured, studying the scene through a small spyglass. Looks quiet, but that doesn't mean much. They descended cautiously, leaving the horses secured in a hidden gully. On foot, they moved from shadow to shadow, alert for any sign of danger. When they reached the crude cabin that matched Abel's description, Penelope's heart pounded with fear and hope. Hank signaled for her to wait while he circled the structure, checking for any threat. When he returned, his expression was grim. Doors ajar. No movement inside that I can see. Penelope moved forward, but Hank caught her arm. Let me go first, he insisted. Drawing his revolver, he approached the cabin with careful steps. The interior was dim after the bright afternoon sun. As Penelope's eyes adjusted, she saw signs of a struggle: overturned furniture, scattered papers, a broken lantern on the floor. Patrick? She called softly, her voice quavering. A groan from the corner sent them both rushing forward. Patrick Keller lay on a narrow cot, his face pale and drawn, a bloodied bandage wrapped around his thigh. Who's there? He demanded weakly, reaching for a rifle propped against the wall. Patrick! It's me, Penelope. She knelt beside him, relief and concern washing over her in equal measure. Recognition dawned in his feverish eyes. Penny? What in God's name are you doing here? Your letter, she explained, examining his wound with gentle hands. You said you were ill, needed help with the claim. Confusion crossed his face. Never sent any letter. Been too busy fighting off Blackwell and his boys. He looked past her to Hank, who stood guard at the door. Who's your friend? Hank Porter, he introduced himself. Met your sister when she nearly drowned crossing Whitewater Canyon. Been helping her reach you. Glad she had someone watching over her? Patrick said, wincing as Penelope cleaned his wound. These mountains are no place for a woman alone. I'm discovering I'm stronger than I thought, Penelope replied with more confidence than she had felt when first arriving in Colorado territory. This wound needs proper care, Patrick. How long ago were you shot? 2 days, maybe 3. Lost track. He grimaced. Blackwell's men came for my claim. Said they had papers proving I'd sold it to them. When I disagreed, they decided a dead man can't dispute ownership. But you got away, Hank observed. Patrick managed a weak smile. Got one of them first. Rest ran when they heard riders coming up the valley. Neighbor checking his traps scared them off. Helped me back here. They'll be back, Hank said grimly. Men like that don't give up on gold so easily. Reinforcements are coming from Cooperville, Penelope assured her brother. But we need to get you to a doctor. Patrick shook his head. Can't risk moving yet. And I won't abandon my claim, it's everything I have. A tense discussion followed, with Penelope insisting on her brother's safety, while Patrick refused to leave his hard-won property. Hank finally proposed a compromise. I can fortify this cabin, set up some deterrence around the perimeter, make Blackwell think twice about an easy raid. He looked at Penelope. Meanwhile, you tend to your brother. If we can keep him stable through the night, help should arrive by tomorrow afternoon. As darkness fell, they worked quickly to prepare for a possible attack. Hank showed surprising ingenuity, rigging noisemakers from tin cans and string around the cabin's surroundings, boarding up windows, and creating firing positions that covered all approaches. Inside, Penelope cleaned Patrick's wound thoroughly, relieved to find no sign of serious infection. The bullet had passed through the muscle without hitting bone or major vessels. With proper rest and care, he would recover fully. As night deepened, Patrick fell into an exhausted sleep. Penelope joined Hank by the cabin's single window, where he maintained a vigilant watch. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. I don't know what I would have done without you. Hank's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her against his side. You'd have found a way. You're stronger than you know, Penelope Keller. Perhaps, she acknowledged, but I'm glad I didn't have to find out alone. They stood together in comfortable silence, the moonlight casting silver patterns across the floor. Despite the danger that might still be lurking in the darkness, Penelope felt strangely at peace. When this is over, Hank said softly, what will you do? Return to Boston? The question hung between them, heavy with implication. There's nothing for me in Boston, she replied, turning to face him. But here, her hand rose to touch his cheek. Here I've found something I never expected. His kiss was different this time, deeper, more certain, a promise rather than a question. When they finally parted, breathless, the look in his eyes told Penelope everything she needed to know about her future. Dawn broke with no sign of Blackwell's gang. By mid-morning, Patrick was stronger, his fever reduced thanks to Penelope's care. Hank had just returned from checking their perimeter when the sound of multiple horses approached. They tensed, weapons ready, until a familiar voice called out Abel Johnson's greeting. With him rode a dozen armed men from Cooperville and neighboring settlements, including the doctor who had treated Abel. Figured you might need some help, Abel explained with a grin. Mrs. Cooper can be mighty persuasive when she sets her mind to something. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The territorial marshal arrived with deputies, using the gathered witnesses' testimonies to issue warrants for Blackwell and his men. Patrick's wound began to heal properly under the doctor's care, and the combined presence of armed neighbors ensured no further threats to the mining claims. During this time, Penelope found herself falling into a natural partnership with Hank. They worked side by side caring for Patrick, repairing the damage to his cabin, and helping organize the community's defense plans. Each evening brought them closer, shared experiences and quiet conversations building a foundation stronger than any Penelope had known in her previous life. A week after their arrival at Widow's Creek, they stood together by the stream that gave the valley its name, enjoying a rare moment alone. "Marshall thinks they've tracked Blackwell to New Mexico territory," Hank informed her. "Doubt he'll risk returning here with so many eyes watching now." "Good," Penelope said firmly. "Patrick's talking about establishing a proper settlement here. Says with the new silver strikes, Widow's Creek could become a real town within a year." Hank nodded, picking up a flat stone and skipping it across the water's surface. "He's probably right. Place has good water, decent access to timber. Could be something substantial in time. He's offered me part ownership in his claim," Penelope continued, watching Hank's reaction carefully. "Says I've earned it, helping save his life and the property. That's generous. You planning to become a mining magnate?" There was a careful neutrality in his tone that told her he was guarding his feelings. "Actually, I was thinking more along the lines of diversification," she replied, moving closer to him. "This valley will need supplies, accommodations for travelers, perhaps medical services." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "You're staying." "I am." Penelope took his hands in hers. "If there's a reason for me to stay." The slow smile that spread across Hank's face was all the answer she needed before he pulled her into his arms. "I'm not a wealthy man," he warned, even as his eyes contradicted any doubt. "Got some savings, enough to build something modest. Life out here won't be easy." "I don't want easy," Penelope told him, her heart fuller than she had ever thought possible. "I want real. I want a partner, not just a husband. I want you, Hank Porter." Their kiss sealed a promise that needed no further words. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the valley in gold and crimson, Penelope thought about the journey that had brought her here from a sheltered Boston existence to this wild, beautiful place where she had nearly lost her life in a river's cold embrace. "River spun her in a cold whirlpool," she murmured against Hank's chest. "What's that?" he asked, his arms tightening around her. Penelope smiled up at him. "Just thinking about the day we met. How you said, 'Hands to my shoulders, trust the turn.' I was terrified, but something made me trust you even then. Best decision you ever made," he teased, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "No," she corrected him softly. "The best decision was staying to see where that trust might lead." As twilight deepened around them, Penelope Keller knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just love, but home in the wild Colorado territory, in the arms of a cowboy who had taught her to trust the turn of fate that had brought them together.